Hi everyone, I'm Aislinn and today I'll be discussing vitamin D bioavailability from different lipid delivery systems. Next slide, please. So we actually know very little about vitamin D absorption, but we do know that it is increased when vitamin D is eaten with fat. This is because dietary fats form vitamin D containing micelles in the small intestine, and these micelles carry vitamin D into the bloodstream. Research has shown that different dietary fatty acids can change the ability of these micelles to carry vitamin D and therefore increase vitamin D absorption. Therefore, this research aimed to determine the effect of the fat component of a fortified dairy drink on postprandial 25-hydroxyvitamin D. Next slide, please. So this was a single-blinded 4-way crossover postprandial study in which participants consumed one dairy drink per visit, and the dairy drinks are shown there on the left. So we had a non-fat dairy drink, a preformed micelle dairy drink, an olive oil-based dairy drink, and a fish oil-based dairy drink. Each drink contained 20 micrograms of vitamin D, and we had a range of 9 to 12 participants complete each study arm. On the right there, you can see we have a timeline of our study visits. So we collected serum samples at 0, 2, 4, 6, and 8 hours for 25-hydroxyvitamin D analysis, as well as anthropometrics and a 24-hour recall. Next slide, please. So these graphs show the mean 25-hydroxyvitamin D per time point per drink in sufficient participants on the top graph and insufficient participants on the bottom graph. So I'd like to draw your attention to hour number 1 there first and highlight the differences you can see in baseline 25-hydroxyvitamin D status. Our preliminary analysis showed that baseline vitamin D status was a predictor of how the participants would respond to the dairy drinks. So on to hour number 2 there, where insufficient participants, we saw no change over time after consumption of any of the dairy drinks. On to hour number 3, where we saw an increase over time after consumption of the olive oil drink, which I've highlighted there in red. And we saw this in both 25-hydroxyvitamin D and secondary measures. However, we saw no change over time after consumption of any of the other dairy drinks. One last point I'd like to highlight is the inter and intra-individual variability we saw in response to the dairy drinks, which is illustrated nicely in these graphs by the large error bars. So to conclude, olive oil may be used in vitamin D food fortification to improve insufficiencies. However, we firstly need large studies to confirm this. We also need to do a bit of work with the food industry to assess any potential issues with scale-up and stability. Next slide, please. So thank you all for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions.